Mulishani Africa, welcome to Bite-Sized Democracy, a weekly show focusing on issues around African democracy. Our show gives Africans a snapshot of what's happening on the continent in fun, bite-sized, informative segments. My anchor for the week is Essie. Welcome to the show, Essie.
Thank you. Jambo Africa. And today's first order of business is talking about Zambia. I don't know if you're aware of what's happening in Zambia regarding the elections.
I've actually read quite a few things that the Electoral Commission has banned rallies and marches for
campaigning.
Exactly, they've stopped campaigning because one of the members of the opposition party, I think there was a shooting and somebody was murdered, so they've stopped for 10 days. Nobody's allowed to campaign in Lusaka, especially. I think
there's been generally a lot of political violence, so that's triggered that, and they can only campaign now on newspapers or on radio, but they can't physically campaign.
Yeah, and I've also seen that I think the opposition, a coalition or something, has petitioned the Constitutional Court to challenge this banning of campaigning, which is actually quite... what impressed me the most is that the Electoral Commission is actually taking charge of this situation, speaking to both the ruling party and the opposition.
Being independent and being its own institution, yes, I also commend that. And also, Zambia has decided that they're no longer recognizing the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. They've decided to rather support Morocco. I don't know if you know about the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic.
Please enlighten us.
It's a territory in sub-Saharan Africa, and the government there controls 20-25% of the territory, and then the rest is under Moroccan rule. Okay. So the Sahrawi government views the other territories as occupied territories. Oh. So now they have that fight, and Zambia has decided that they're going to support Morocco instead of Sahrawi.
Oh wow, very interesting, very interesting. Actually, and then we move on to what's happening on the social media streets. Please speak to us. Our hashtag is BS Democracy. And here's our social media details. Please, if you need to communicate with us, please join the conversation. And then speaking of which, we go to hashtag of the week. What's been exciting? What's been happening on Twitter? I found one very interesting hashtag, which is hashtag Zim in 10 years. This was started by a user called MBlueJ, and basically it's asked other African countries to replace Zim with their countries. Have you seen any of that, Essie?
Yes, I've seen quite a few. I'm looking here. I think there was one that specifically resonated with me. It said, Zim in 10 years, people view a Zimbabwe where graduates are not selling airtime and tomatoes on the streets. Wow. Which I think says a lot about the economic climate in Zimbabwe and the unrest that people have with the system currently.
It does. Speaking of social media, it's become this whole big... I think social media is a country within, and this country, all citizens of the world exist.
Globalization is great, right?
Exactly.
That freedom is there. The next revolution will be tweeted.
It will be.
You know this. And speaking of Zim, this leads us to the African of the Week, who coincidentally is from Zim. Oh, wow. I don't know if you know about Evan Mawarire, the pastor. He started the hashtag This Flag one day when he was just very frustrated with the fact that he couldn't afford fees, and he wrapped the flag around his neck and started airing out his grievances, and a lot of the citizens identified with him, and the hashtag This Flag started flying. And he was the first person who started the national Zim shutdown, where they decided to shut the country down until change happens. And he's advocated for the firing of corrupt ministers, civil servants to be paid on time, an end to police brutality, and all those things. And he was arrested 2 days ago, but he's been freed now. Over 100 human rights lawyers wanted to represent him for free, and now he's a free man.
That is absolutely amazing. It's so amazing to see how what's happening on social media translating actually on the ground in Zimbabwe. And I think this is also in lots of other African countries. This is why most countries are agitated and shutting down social media. In the case of Ethiopia, a week ago, there was limited access to social media. We also saw that in Uganda during elections, there was also limited access to social media. Kenya as well, and Zimbabwe during the shutdown. They didn't want the revolution to be tweeted, so the social media was shut down. But I don't think the revolution will go on. It cannot be contained. Absolutely.
And this further leads us, I think we're the winds of change are blowing everywhere. You look at Zambia, you look at Zimbabwe, people are getting aggravated with the system, and it reminds me of something that the former president Kenneth Kaunda once said, that the power which establishes a state is violence, the power which maintains the state is violence, and the power which eventually overthrows it is violence.
Wow, that's very profound, very, very profound. And today in history, you know, we need to honor our own African heroes. Unfortunately, we don't honor them while they're still alive, but we have one who was one of the greatest African heroes, Nelson Mandela, who was born actually yesterday on the 18th of July, you know, but new heroes are coming out of social media, out of a lot of young African people are doing very heroic things out there.
Definitely, and it's good to honor people in their names. I like even with former President Nelson Mandela's birthday, they've created the 67 minutes of, so I like that when heroes do something, it is acknowledged, and then you take it a step further and you do something in their name to inspire change. So I think
that's great that you brought that up. I always wondered why 67 minutes, but 67 minutes represents every year that he spent in service. It was a very selfless man.
Definitely, and I like that everything today. And you know, he said that thing about how if the ANC government did to them what the apartheid government did to the country, we should overthrow them. I think that's kind of the climate all over Africa. People are saying if the government is not abiding by what we want, then we're going to stand up as the people, and that's what we're seeing in Zimbabwe and Zambia. And certainly the winds of change are blowing all over Africa. And it reminds me of something the former president of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, once said about how the power which establishes a state is violence, the power which maintains it is violence, and the power which eventually overthrows the state is violence.
Wow,
so I think that resonates today.
It does. It's very profound. Very, very profound. Move on. Actually, next week is going to be another exciting show. Next week we'll be focusing on elections in Africa. There's actually a few elections that are coming. There's the DRC, maybe not. There's also Somalia, maybe not. Zambia. So next week, Zambia as well. Yes, Zambia. So next week we'll be speaking on African elections. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Until next week, Shalenipo.